Hello, once again, everyone. Today we're going to talk about how to draw a colored pencil still life. We're going to do this in class, this lecture, but if you missed that day, you were sick or absent, or you just really enjoyed it and want to watch it again, here it is. So let me share my screen with you. And I'm going to go through all 80 slides of this. But for you, if you're watching it at home, you might want to take a break at some point. Give yourself a brain break because this is a lot of information. All right, how to draw a colored pencil still life. First of all, maybe we should talk about what is a still life. Of course, a still life is a bunch of inanimate objects all piled up on a table and you draw them or paint them or photograph them. Nice thing about a still life is it's still, like it doesn't move, right? That's kind of nice. Whereas some things like wind making a tree move or shadows changing on things when the sun moves in the sky or trying to draw a bird or a horse. And there's some things that are just difficult to draw because they move. But this is something that an artist would set up so it's easier to draw because you control not only the objects, but the light source. So the shadows and the highlights and how much space you want to get out of it. So, and also they call it a still life because, well, generally there's some kind of life. You know, it might be fruit or veggies or a fish or a lobster or flowers or some living stuff. So that's how they get the name still life. Artists have been doing this for a long time. This is nothing new. So if you look at this example here, you know, you have to understand some artists set this up just, I think, sometimes to torture him or herself. Generally, artists do this. Why? Well, it's these last four words here: to improve their skills. When I went to college, I did dozens and dozens of still lives. And after I got done with those semesters at college, I got good. I was practicing and practicing and practicing. And that's generally why an artist creates a still life, to practice. I don't know many artists that say, you know what, this room really needs is a table with some fabric draped over it, and some wine and some grapes and apples. That would be the perfect thing to go on this wall. Well, no. Generally, an artist sets this up and they want to get better, so they put stuff on it that's difficult. I mean, this is not easy to draw transparent objects and a fabric with a design like that on it, or, you know, see-through things, metallic things, these grapes that have that film on them, you know, to try to capture that stuff like the stripes in this apple or the roughness of this table is a challenge. But once you do it, well, then it's kind of intuitive and you get better. Imagine this artist who set this up. Oh my gosh. I mean, they didn't just put a melon here. They cut into the melon so you can see the seeds. They could have just put a lemon here, but no, they peeled the lemon so the peel is spiraling down. I mean, the way they set up this fabric, it's not just draped like a tablecloth. They bunched it up. And they've got transparent things and metallic things and piles of things. And I cannot imagine painting something that involved. My still lives were all a little bit easier than that. But again, why would an artist do this? To get better. So why am I having you do this? Why is Mr. Linderman torturing you? Because I think you can get better. I believe in you. And I believe that if you do this exercise, your drawing skills will go up a notch. So that's the big why you're doing this. But I digress. Let's move into some different artists. Let's take a look at how they tackled still lives. These are well-known artists. More importantly, notice how each one kind of tackles this idea in a different way. Different artists do still lives for different reasons. MC Escher, for example, and he was not a rapper, okay? This is not like MC Hammer, but his name was Moritz Cornelius Escher, which I'd probably go with MC too if my name was Moritz. Kind of weird. Anyway, this guy, I feel like he's showing off here, right? I mean, he's showing you how to draw a broken egg or a peeled back piece of aluminum on this little tin can here. I mean, broken shards of pottery, broken glass, a piece of paper that's wadded up. These are not easy things to draw. This artist is kind of saying, yeah, I can draw anything. And then there's a strange geometric orb thing in the middle. The guy was really into mathematics and impossible figures. And so he's showing that he can do that too. Here's another one of his. This is actually carved in wood and printed on paper. This is a woodcut, but for our purposes, it's essentially a drawing. So he's drawing these objects in the front, which is a still life. And then oddly, this table top turns into a street. You know, the books turn into buildings. So he's like a two-dimensional magician, this guy. So it's kind of an optical illusion, right? Is it a table or is it a street or is it both? But he's showing off, again, his skill in drawing still lives. Very impressive. Here we have one by Salvador Dali. He was a strange feller. But, well, if you knew him or you knew his artwork, like the melting watches, it's called the persistence of memory. But you know the one with the melting clocks? Same guy. Of course, he's going to do some strange, dreamlike still life where objects are flying around. But look at how he challenged himself. This looks like broccoli over here, whatever it is. I mean, that's intense to try to capture that texture of these transparent objects, and he's thinking about the shadows. This tablecloth looks like it was folded. I mean, the guy's good. Here's Picasso, now totally different style. Picasso was into, reducing things into its simple geometric or simplified forms and shapes. So of course he's just going to use primary colors for the most part, black and white, simple geometric shapes. But hopefully, if you see things like I do, you can see there's objects piled up on a table that we've got a still life here. Now, Mr. Monet, this guy was interested in light, the atmospheric conditions and the lighting and the shadows and the highlights. He was trying to capture a certain mood through light and time of day. So his is a little looser in style. Of course, he was kind of one of the fathers of Impressionism. So you're seeing maybe an impression of an apple. It's not like a perfect apple, but he was really trying to capture the exact lighting and colors. And so his is different. Then you get a guy named Wayne Thiebaud, who his still life is dessert. It doesn't have to be like old school flowers in vase on table next to grapes. This guy did a lot of still lives of cakes and pies and gumballs and all kinds of delicious still lives. Why not? Why not make your still life look delicious? Anyway, just wanted to show you a few different artists and how they tackle things differently. I do still lives. I like to do still lives that are thematic. So they actually have like a little story behind them. That's just me. All right. Next, since we're going to draw a still life, we might as well talk about what makes a good composition. I know we've talked about this, but I want to reiterate. Generally, an artist doesn't put something right in the middle because all you do is you stare at that thing right in the middle. And it doesn't make your eye wander around the edges. Did you even see there was a shadow there? Did you even see this blotchy area up here? No, you're just staring at a pear. So that's kind of what not to do. Here's another example, which is more complex. It's a picture with some different things going on. But again, all of our attention is drawn here, and the background and the edges just become forgettable. We want people's eyes to move, in case you don't know how artists think. We want our viewers to look at the work and look around and stick around for a while and see things and hang out, because after all, it takes a long time to produce these things. So even this one, this is like a great, believe it or not, this is a painting. Looks like a photo, but this amazing painting, and you can kind of see that maybe some of the brushwork down here where it looks like it's been slapped on like toothpaste. Anyway, I wouldn't spend too much time with this. If I saw this at a museum, I'd probably check it out for a minute and then mosey on to the next one. It's just because it's right in the middle. There's no need to look at anything else. It's kind of boring. But anyway, long story short, you want to use that rule of thirds, just like we did with our landscapes. So remember, don't put something in the middle. I'm beating a dead horse here. But make sure it's kind of off-center in one of those hot spots or those ideal emphasis areas. By doing that, you're going to force the viewer's eyes to move around. And you'll get juxtaposition. So here's one, for example. This is an old school work of art they call a memento mori. Back in the 1600s and 1700s, a lot of artists would paint like this, and they were trying to, again, it's thematic, like I like, and they would paint something about death to remember someone by. So there's all kinds of symbols for death. Of course, the skull, but also like the chalice is emptied out. The cup has spilled out. We've got a little bit of incense or like a candle that's being snuffed out, right? It's almost gone. The chapter's closed. The ink is dry on the pen. It's all symbols for death. But aside from the painting, which is really cool, the idea is this artist has used the rule of thirds. What's in the middle? I don't know, nothing really. It's kind of boring there. But they know intuitively to move things off center. Here's another one. Nothing really in the middle. Just artists just know this, like it's just a rule. We call it the rule of thirds. So this one here, again, amazing. I mean, this person made a cornucopia out of like newspaper with pepper coming out. That's That's tough to do. And the texture that they get on this, the way they made the glass look transparent, this artist challenged himself or herself. But again, the rule of thirds, it's really important. So write that down in your notes. Must use the rule of thirds because that's what I'm grading you on. Another cool compositional device is to try to have lots of diagonals in your work. When you have horizontals, I don't know if we have an example here, but horizontals generally make your eye kind of rest. Even Mr. Monet that knew that putting that table at an angle is more interesting. If this table were just sideways, it's a little less interesting. I would even argue Wayne Thiebaud's is a little flat back here, but he put his desserts on a diagonal. Artists just know this too. So here's an example with lots of diagonals. You can kind of spot them here. Lots and lots of diagonals. It just makes your eye move. You can't help but move. Whereas when you have horizontals, your eye just kind of rests and it doesn't move around as much. So write that down. That's a good tip. Before you go to draw yours, maybe move to a different side of your still life so that it becomes more interesting visually. Now, you do have to put this in your still life. So write these three things down. I need you to have a foreground, a middle ground, and a background so that there's lots of space and depth in your artwork. So of course, I think you guys know this, but just to reiterate, a foreground is something that's in front, like your forehead, right? Like your forehand. These bananas, I would say, are in the foreground. The middle ground, maybe this vase here, kind of seems like it's in the middle. Things in the background, maybe this blurry, out of focus, salt or pepper grinder back here. Or way in the background is this really blurry window. So where you draw that line, like where exactly do you make the middle ground, or where is the background and middle ground meet? There's often not a real clear answer, but the point is have things that are, you know, in detail and in focus up front, generally in the lower part of your scene. Things in the middle of your scene to move your eye back, and things in the distance. And if you want to make them blurry in the distance, that would be really cool. That's how artists work. They try to make it look less detailed and out of focus. So why am I going over this slide for so long? Well, that's another thing that I'm grading you on. Does it have, you know, fore, middle, and background? So here's another example. You can just check it out. Your background might be quite simple. You might even do a background of something where you do some doodling or some graffiti or some henna or zentangling, but make sure you've got some space. So I'll just ask you for 1 second. Can you name an object in the middle ground? Sure. How about in the foreground? Do you see those clouds in the background? I think you guys get it. One more thing you could do, and this is not a right or wrong thing, but you could make your entire composition asymmetric, right? Off to one side, like that picture of Whistler's mother that he painted, you know. Well, this is one that I did actually. This is one of mine from my freshman year of college when I was about 18, and I was drawing still lives every day. And I remember when I drew this, I thought, wow, that's a pile of stuff I've got to draw. I'm just going to draw half of it and make it asymmetric. And at the end of class, all the people put their artwork up on the board, and everyone's looked the same. They all drew the big pile of stuff, but mine looked different because I made it asymmetric. And a lot of people stopped and went, I like that one, just because it was different. So again, you don't have to do this, but sometimes it makes for a fun and interesting composition. Here's one by Paul Cézanne, who has a very asymmetric composition, weighted to one side. I like those. That's a personal favorite. But now it's time to get your pencils ready to write down the best tips and tricks for a successful still life drawing. Number one, we should start with how to start. So you've got a pile of stuff in front of you. Logically, how do we get started? Well, with landscapes, you usually move from the back to the front. Like you'll draw in the sky and then put a mountain on top and then put in some trees and then maybe put something in the tree. Well, with still lives, it's kind of the opposite. You want to start with an object that's in front. Once you've got the object in front, it's easy to find out where the things behind it go. For example, if you drew this pear first, and then you want to draw the picture, well, you can say, well, that picture goes right into the top of the handle here, goes right into the middle of the pear. That would be weird, I think, to draw the picture first and stop, and then try to draw the pear there. Like I would definitely draw this first, then you'll know, hey, the bottom of the picture goes almost near the bottom of this. So you kind of want to start in the front and move your way back. So here's another example. Like if I were drawing these objects, I would easily start with the orange. First of all, it's easy, it's round. But once you've got the orange there, then you can say, well, where does this shiny vase go? Oh, let's look at that vase. It goes right into the top, right where the belly button of this orange is. Where does the side of the vase go? Oh, it's about halfway up on the orange. How tall is that vase? Well, it's about 3 oranges high. So you can use the orange or the object in front to try to help you draw the things behind. You just have to trust me on this. If you're new at drawing still lives, long story short, start in the front, move to the back. So let me ask you, which object would you start with if you were drawing this? I surely wouldn't start with, say, this barrel back here. Me, I might start with this, or maybe I'd start with this box here. Yeah, I think just starting with something in front that's easy, that's the way to go. Another thing you could do is you could use a viewfinder. When I was in college, we'd actually hold on to something like this, and we'd hold it up in front of us, and you could, some of them you could adjust like this and make them bigger or smaller. And we would look through this little viewfinder to try to use our rule of thirds and see what makes a good composition. Maybe you've seen people do this before, and like directors or photographers will hold it up in front of their face and what they're doing is trying to see, what is this going to look like inside of a frame, on the TV, in the movie, or on my painting or drawing. So they're thinking about that composition and the ideal emphasis. Now, I'm not going to give you one of these, but you can use your phone. For example, if you go to your phone and go into settings, it might say 3x3 or grid. It might say rule of thirds. For some of you, you might have to go into settings first and then into your camera. Others, you might have a Droid, an Android. You might go into your camera, and then within your camera, there might be a settings button. But for sure, you can bring up the rule of thirds right on your camera. And then from now on, instead of taking a picture of your little nephew or whatever and putting them right in the middle of the frame, maybe move them to the side. Think like a photographer. So you can use this when you are taking pictures of your still life, and it might be helpful. But after a while, for artists like me, this becomes intuitive, and you just know. You don't put the person in the middle. So when I take photos, I just move people off center. All right, the next good tip I've got for you, which we're going to do in class, is to do some thumbnail sketches. Of course, they're not really the size of your thumbnail, but that's what they call them, and you know this. If you're on the computer, you click on a little picture called the thumbnail, and then the picture gets bigger, and you get the bigger idea. Well, most artists I know, if they're going to do a serious still life, the first thing they're going to do is do some sketching. So here you can see an artist who's done, 10 different sketches. I'm going to ask you folks to do 4. So let's just look at some. Here's someone who did some different sketches. Which one do you think is the best? And why? Which one's not working so well? Well, hopefully you'll agree that this one here is not working well. Number one, there's only 3 objects. That's not much of a still life. And they're sitting on the bottom of the picture plane. That's weird. The bottom of your paper does not represent the table. This is better. These have been moved up, and they have some cast shadows, so I feel like they sit there. And they only have 2 objects, but if this artist did something weird, they have the objects touching, and that's what's called, you have tangent lines. These lines are tangent. That can be really confusing to the viewer. Here's another case of that. You don't really want to make that happen. So if you end up with that, well, just try to move the objects a little bit, either in actuality, in your still life, or when you're drawing them. Just move it a little bit. This is actually a good composition, though. We've got things lined up right on these hot spots, but aside from that tangent part, not bad. This one's great. There's really nothing in the middle. It's kind of just dead here, but they've got all kinds of interesting things lined up on those hot spots. So that's a good one. All right, couple more tips for you. Now, this is what I call it. I call it bobblehead drawing, because I find that a lot of new drawers, when they're looking at something and trying to draw that thing and put it down on their paper, they do this. They look at it for a minute, and then they put their head down, and they just draw and draw and draw. And then they look up and go, oh, that doesn't look like that. And you get frustrated. But I've learned that when you're drawing, you look at the object, and you look down, and you look up, and you look down and you look up a lot, kind of like your bobblehead drawing, because you're going up and down. And what happens is you're really drawing the thing that's in front of you, and you see it at the same time that it's on your paper, and you can catch any mistakes and you can fix things quickly. And you just have to trust me on this one. If you look up and down about every 2 seconds or 1 second, you're going to end up with a much better drawing. If you think that you can just look at something and capture it like you've got a photographic memory and then put your head down for 30 seconds and draw it, you're going to look back up and go, oh, that does not look like that. Why is this so hard? So trust me on that, bobblehead drawing. And I've got just one more tip for you, which I call chunking. Now, I know some of you think that artists are just born great artists, or that we sprinkle magic, artist dust over our head and then we start drawing. No, we have to work hard. We really have to look and really slow down and do the hard work if we want to make something look realistic. And what I do is, I got to pass this on. This is the good stuff. I take it in chunks, okay? If I'm trying to draw something like this, which amazingly is a still life done in colored pencil, I don't look at all this and freak out. I just go, you know what? I'm just going to tackle this one little chunk. I'm not going to draw all of this. I'm just going to draw maybe this, just this one small section. So I get out my orange and my red and I work on this little part here, and I put a little white in there that looks like a little Nike swoosh. And then I get out my gray, my light gray. In this whole area, it might take me 10 minutes. So I know what you're thinking, like, oh my gosh, 10 minutes. So the whole top would take you like an hour or an hour and a half? Yeah, probably. So this whole side might take 2 hours? Maybe, yeah. So the whole drawing might take you 20 hours? Yeah, to make it look that good, it would. So you just take it in chunks. After you get that little chunk, you take the next chunk, and then you move on to the next chunk. Don't try to draw everything perfect at once. You're gonna freak out. It's gonna be way too much work. Take little sections. When you do all those little sections, after a while, it starts to add up, and it looks great. And go slow, try your best. All right, we'll talk to you briefly about colored pencils, and then we're done for the day. Colored pencils. Oof. You might have a set of 12 that you got from me, which are Crayolas. They're not the best, but they'll work. They'll do fine. You might have some fancy ones like some Faber-Castells or some Prismacolors, and you might have more color options. The more colors you have, well, the more easy this will be for you. But if you have just 12 colors, you can still mix those and you can make it work. One thing I might encourage you to do is to start lightly. Just put down, maybe even start with pencil. Make everything very light in pencil, and then slowly build up the colors. Press a little harder, press a little harder. The beauty of that is if you start lightly and you make mistakes, you can erase them. Yes, colored pencils can erase. But once you put down a lot of material, they're not going to erase. I mean, some of it will, but it will stain your paper. But the idea, though, is to actually press so hard that you are burnishing the colored pencil into the paper, because all paper has a little bit of tooth or texture. So it's like hills and valleys, okay? So if you just press lightly, what's happening is you're just putting the colored pencil on top of the hills, on these high parts of your paper, but you're not pressing it down into the valleys. But if you burnish, that's like press really hard, or burnish the color down into those valleys, oh, then it looks rich and it looks lush and it looks like you could pick up that apple or tomato or whatever it is. So here's an example of an artist who has fully burnished their colored pencil. I mean, that just looks solid. It looks amazing. Here's one that's mostly burnished. In the background, it's you can kind of see the pencil strokes and the cross hatching. It still looks pretty darn good. Same with this one. Mostly burnished, but it's not super solid. You kind of can see some of that graininess and that texture. This one's mostly not burnished. You can see lots of little white spots, little white flecks, and that's the texture or tooth of the paper. Now, some people like this look, and that's fine. It looks more, misty, atmospheric, So it's not right or wrong, really. I guess you could draw an apple this way, but I would rather do it this way. In fact, I would rather do it this way. In fact, if I was doing mine, I'd have a step 4 here. It would look so good. There'd be none of these little white flecks and speckles. Like you could pick it up and feel like you could take a bite out of it. Kind of like this example. Like these bananas look solid, right? All the colored pencil has been really burnished. These mostly, but you can see some of those little textures, the tooth of the paper. This one, yeah, not as delicious as these. Well, in part because the banana's green. That's just gross. Anyway, I'm going to move on. So these are the 5 things I'm going to ask you folks to do on this still life. This is what's going through my bald head when I grade your work. So first of all, you just want to choose, part of the still life. You don't have to draw the whole still life. You might set up 20 objects, but just kind of zoom in on one area. Draw at least 5 objects. If you have less than 5, that's not quite a party yet. So at least 5, but I'm not saying only 5. I would do more than 5, but that's the minimum. Make sure you've got an interesting composition. You might end up with something in the middle, but make sure it's not the emphasis, the cool thing. There's got to be something in your composition, your still life that's really cool. Don't put it in the middle, okay? I do want you to try to make it as realistic as possible. So really look, okay? Really slow down and take it in chunks. I also want you to use multiple colors. Nothing in this world is just one color. I guess unless you go to the paint store and get a little square that's one color. But most anything is made up of different colors because when light hits it, like this tennis ball, for example, you need a bright color up here, a bright yellow, but down here, you might need a darker yellow or almost a yellowish green or tannish color. So even a tennis ball, which appears to be all the same color, you're going to need more than one color to draw that thing. A banana is not just yellow. You're going to need white and light yellow and darker yellow or orange colors and brown. And so that's what I'm getting at. In your still life, use lots of colors. And lastly, of course, yes, you need to show me some space. A foreground, a middle ground, a background. Beyond that, I don't really care. I don't care which way you turn your paper. Do you want to go vertical or horizontal? How much you zoom in or zoom out, or what objects you have in there, or what kind of crazy stuff you do in the background, or how you can be fun and creative with it, like maybe having fish swim around your still life, or you've got things growing out of your still life, or vines wrapped around your objects, or a snake. I mean, you guys can get creative with this because still lives can be kind of boring. But these are the 5 basic things that I'm trying to teach you, and I want to see you put into practice. So you should probably do those. All right, there's more, but we'll talk about it next time I see you. But for now, I hope you're a little jazzed about doing what can be a boring thing, but it's a cool thing because you're going to get better, and you get to make your own still life, and I'm here to help you. So see you next time.